Crystal Rivera lives in Philadelphia's Fair Hill section. It's a neighborhood mired in poverty and one that desperately needs the funding that comes from the census. But Rivera says amid the pandemic and moving homes, she forgot to fill out the census.
It passed my mind.
She says others in the area have bigger worries than filling out a government form.
Everybody's trying to find stability.
A census worker knocked on Rivera's door in August and helped her fill out the census. But there are others like Daryl West who haven't yet been reached by a census worker.
You have not filled out the census?
No.
Do you know what the census is?
No. How do you go about filling it out?
The census is a government survey of population and housing. It is done every 10 years. Fernando Armstrong is the census regional director overseeing Pennsylvania. He tells us that the demographics from the census determines political representation at the state and federal level. The census also determines how much federal funding every state and city gets for the next decade.
The stakes are high because every year over $675 billion come back to the community in terms of roads, hospitals, schools.
In the Philadelphia suburbs, already more than 75% of households have filled out the census, but cities in our region are struggling. Only 55% of households in Philly have self-responded to the census. That's compared to 62% in 2010. Wilmington has a 51% rate compared to 62% in 2010. Camden City has a 48% self-response rate compared to 58% in 2010. Jeff Beller is the Census Regional Director overseeing New Jersey. He says urban areas rely on in-person census takers.
The social media, the advertising on TV doesn't really reach them as much as that in-person activity.
Door knocking by volunteers and census workers normally happens between April and July. But because of COVID-19, August was the earliest people could follow up in person with non-responders. Complicating matters, the census hired about half of the door-to-door census workers nationwide for 2020 as it did in 2010. Armstrong says that's because the 2020 census is available for people to fill out and submit online.
The design of the census in 2020 permits us not to have to hire the huge amount of people we had to hire in the past.
Still, he planned for 2,000 people to work in Philly. When that number fell short, the Census Bureau flew in workers from other parts of the country
in order to make that number.
The musical chairs of census workers is ongoing throughout the country, and many of those door knockers are working overtime.
We have now established an award system to promote, to encourage people to work the most hours they can.
The deadline for self-responses and for census workers to follow up is October 31st. After that, census workers have to look through property records and other government data to try to account for every single person and housing unit.
We are aiming to get to 100%, and that's my goal.
For the investigators, I'm Claudia Vargas, NBC10 News.